Oh, look at the glory there. That is some beautiful coffee. Well, the coffee's flowing and it's time to get going. Hey, welcome back to Questions Over Coffee. My name's Kevin Smith. It's good to see you again. Want a cup of coffee? Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss anything that's coming up on Questions Over Coffee. If you have a comment or a question, leave in the section below. We'll get to it just as fast as we can. Today's question is Philip's response in John chapter 6, verses 5 through 7, a lack of faith? Now, I will tell you, growing up, I want to say that's all I heard was this was a lack of faith on Philip's part. But some recent study got me kind of questioning that. So what we're going to do today is take a brief look at what Philip says when Jesus poses a question to him and see, well, some possibilities for yes and some possibilities for no as far as this being a lack of faith on Philip's part. So as we get started, let's go ahead and read John chapter 6, verses 5 through 7. Therefore, Jesus, lifting up his eyes and seeing that a large crowd was coming to him, said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these may eat?" This he was saying to test him, for he himself knew what he was intending to do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, for everyone to receive a little. Okay, so the cut and dry answer would be yes. Right? Not necessarily, but let's take a look at the yes answer first, that it is a lack of faith. Well, first and foremost, Philip seemed to not remember who was talking to him. It wasn't like Peter or one of the other apostles were asking him this question and Philip pops up with the numbers game of 200 denarii won't supply for this. So, yes, he's talking to the Son of God. So, in that regard, well, when he issues the numbers on the whole thing, you might consider it to be a lack of faith. After all, Philip has already seen Jesus perform a number of miracles, right? Most notably at this point, he has seen Jesus calm the sea. Some passages to consider in this regard, you can read Matthew chapter 8, verses 23 through 27. You could also read Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 41. Or you could also read Luke chapter 8, verses 22 through 25. In each one of these cases, Jesus does reprimand them for their lack of faith. Long story short, in this particular case, in all three of these, is that they are crossing the sea. Jesus has gone down into the hull of the ship and he is asleep. And they come to him, "Lord, Lord, don't you care that we're going to perish?" And he goes up and tells the sea and the wind to hush, to be still. And at that point, questions their faith. But at this point, that being said, what you've got is Jesus performing other miracles like healings and demon possession, but he has not, at least as far as we have recorded in the New Testament, yet fed a large crowd of people like he will in this feeding of the 5,000. So let's take a look at the no answer, that this was not a lack of faith on Philip's part. The first thing that I would like to say with a no answer is that sometimes financial considerations is in fact simply a knee-jerk reaction. Back in 2007, when my wife told me that she was pregnant with our second child, I was extremely happy. But the second thing that happened was, oh no, how are we going to pay for this? You know, I mean, it was a knee-jerk reaction. We think, in many cases, financially. How are we going to pay for this? What does this cost? Things like that. So Philip very well could be wired that way, in the sense of, what are we going to do about this, Philip? Well, let me crunch the numbers real quick. So I mean, that is a possibility. But also, quite honestly, second is that Philip had not seen this kind of miracle before. As we've already mentioned, he's seen Jesus heal people. He's seen Jesus cast demons out, things like that. But he has not yet seen Jesus feed a multitude. Okay, so at this point, this is a brand new thing. Now, you might be saying, Kevin, what about the feeding of the 4,000? In all of your synoptic gospels, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the feeding of the 5,000 is recorded first. And it's not till later that the 4,000 are fed. Here are the passages for that. In Matthew, as we mentioned, the feeding of the 5,000 is Matthew chapter 14, 13 through 21. The feeding of the 4,000 is Matthew 15, 32 through 39. In Mark, it's Mark chapter 6, 33 through 44 is the feeding of the 5,000. And the feeding of the 4,000 is not until Mark 8, 1 through 9. And then, actually, both Luke and John do not record the feeding of the 4,000. They both record the feeding of the 5,000. So, at that point, you might be saying, well, what am I going to do about this, Jesus? How do we feed these people? That's a pretty big crowd. Here's what F.F. Bruce, one of the fairly well-known commentators, had to say about the situation with Philip and whether it was a lack of faith. This is, as you can see, the Gospel and Epistles of John. We're going to get the quote from page 143. There are several places in the Gospel of John where individual disciples are named, as against the general reference to his disciples in parallel accounts in the other Gospels. Here John is the only evangelist who particularizes the roles of Philip and Andrew in the discussion about the ways and means of feeding the crowd. Since Philip came from the neighboring town of Bethsaida, cross-reference John 1:44, it was natural that he should be consulted about places where food might be bought. So, in this case, Philip was basically a hometown boy. So, it very well could be that he thought that Jesus was simply saying, okay, where do we go to buy food for this? How do we supply for these people? Now, we know, because the Gospel of John tells us, that Jesus was simply using this to test him, that Jesus already had a game plan in mind. So the key question is, was Jesus actually upset with Philip? If he is upset with Philip for Philip's answer, there is no recording of that. As we mentioned with the calming of the sea in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he questioned the disciples' faith. He does not do that in this particular accounting of the feeding. So, was Jesus upset? It does not look that way. So, was this a lack of faith? We have evidence and arguments on both sides, and I just supplied just a few of them, okay? Some say yes, some say no, but the arguments are there. for us to decide whether we believe it was or not. So I have a question for you. How do we know if someone is simply posing a question or answering a question in a common sense way, or if it is a lack of faith by the question that they ask or the answer that they supply? How do we know if it's a legitimate question, legitimate response, or a lack of faith? Leave me a comment in the section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss anything that's coming up on Questions Over Coffee. Thank you for our time together today. I look forward to the next time. Keep pressing forward.